The house was quiet that evening, but Maria's heart was not. She had been married to Daniel for 7 years, and in those years, she had learned every shade of his personality. He was charming in public, respected among friends, and admired by colleagues. But behind closed doors, his words often cut sharper than knives. For months, Maria had sensed something was wrong. Daniel's late-night meetings, the way he guarded his phone, and the sudden bursts of irritation whenever she asked simple questions all pointed to one truth she didn't want to face. One evening, as she cleared the dining table, Daniel's phone buzzed. He had left it carelessly on the counter while stepping into the shower. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. She knew she shouldn't look. She knew that crossing this line would change everything. But curiosity mixed with fear pushed her. A single message lit up the screen. "Last night was unforgettable. Can't wait to see you again." Maria's heart sank. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was reality. She placed the phone back exactly as it was and sat silently on the couch. Tears threatened to fall, but she held them back, not because she was strong, but because she knew crying wouldn't change him. When Daniel came out of the shower, he looked refreshed, humming a tune as if nothing had happened. He kissed her cheek casually and asked about dinner. She nodded, hiding her storm behind a calm face. That night, while Daniel slept peacefully, Maria lay awake. Betrayal burned in her chest, but anger did not consume her. Instead, something else grew inside her: determination. She whispered to herself, almost like a vow, "You broke my trust, Daniel, but you will never break me." From that moment, Maria began to plan. She would not scream. She would not beg. She would not even confront him directly. No, she would let him believe she was the weak, useless wife he mocked in front of friends. And then, when the time was right, she would turn his entire world upside down. The betrayal had cut deep, but Maria was about to show Daniel that even the deepest wounds can carve the sharpest weapons. The next morning, Maria made breakfast as usual. Her hands moved calmly, her smile soft, her voice gentle as if nothing had happened the night before. Daniel, sipping his coffee, never suspected the storm brewing behind her quiet eyes. "Don't forget, we have a family dinner at my parents' place this weekend," he reminded, glancing at his phone with a smirk. Maria nodded politely. "Of course, Daniel." But inside, her mind was already weaving a plan. She knew Daniel's family, especially his father, respected appearances above everything else. A scandal, an exposed betrayal, would not only ruin Daniel's reputation, but also cost him dearly in business and relationships. That afternoon, Maria visited her old friend Clara, a lawyer who had always admired Maria's intelligence. Over tea, Maria leaned closer and whispered, "I need your help," quietly. "I want everything documented: texts, calls, even bank transfers. I need proof." Clara's eyes widened. "Maria, are you sure? This is big." Maria's lips curled into a calm but determined smile. "I'm more than sure. He thinks I'm weak. It's time I show him what weakness can do." For weeks, Maria played the perfect wife. She smiled at Daniel's jokes, cooked his favorite meals, and never asked where he was going late at night. But behind the curtain, she worked tirelessly. With Clara's help, she collected evidence: screenshots of messages, hotel bookings, even pictures of Daniel with the woman he thought was his secret. Each piece of evidence was like a knife, sharpened and placed carefully in her arsenal. One evening, while Daniel laughed at something on his phone, Maria looked at him across the table. He didn't notice the way her eyes held no pain anymore, only a quiet fire. Daniel leaned back, arrogant and careless. "You know, Maria, sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice marrying you. Maybe I deserve someone better." The words stung, but Maria only smiled faintly. "Maybe you do, Daniel." He smirked, thinking he had crushed her spirit again. But in that moment, Maria wasn't hurt, she was satisfied. Every cruel word he spoke was fuel for the revenge she was carefully preparing. She wasn't going to scream. She wasn't going to beg. No, she was going to wait. And when the time came, her silence would roar louder than any scream ever could. The weekend dinner arrived. Daniel, dressed in his best suit, looked every bit the successful, confident man. Maria walked beside him gracefully, her silence mistaken for submission. His father's house buzzed with chatter. Relatives, business partners, and friends filled the room. Daniel's father, a stern man with high standards, often reminded Maria she was lucky to have his son. Tonight would be no different. Or so Daniel thought. As dinner was served, Daniel raised a toast. To family, to loyalty, and to success. His words dripped with irony, but nobody noticed except Maria. She smiled, lifting her glass, but her mind was focused on the small envelope inside her purse. Inside were the documents Clara had prepared, undeniable proof of Daniel's betrayal. When the plates were cleared, Daniel's father began his usual speech about honor and reputation. He glanced at Maria and said with cold arrogance, "My son deserves the best. Don't ever forget that." Maria lowered her eyes, hiding the fire in them. "You're absolutely right, sir," she replied softly. Daniel smirked, proud of himself, unaware that every second was pushing him closer to the edge of the cliff Maria had built for him. The clock struck 9. The room buzzed with conversation when suddenly Daniel's phone vibrated. He picked it up casually, but his face froze. One message read, "Mr. Daniel, due to personal reasons, the merger is cancelled. Lawson & Co." His business deal, the one he had been boasting about for months, had collapsed. Before he could recover, another message flashed. It was from his best friend. "I can't believe you. Don't ever call me again." Daniel's hands trembled. His confidence melted away in front of everyone. The chatter in the room dimmed as whispers began to spread. Then came the final blow, a message from Maria. He opened it slowly, his face pale. "Don't mess with useless trash." The blood drained from his face. His eyes shot up, meeting Maria's calm, steady gaze across the table. For the first time in years, he saw her not as weak, not as silent, but as powerful. Daniel's father looked confused. "What's going on?" he demanded. Maria rose from her chair, opened her purse, and placed the envelope on the table. "Perhaps you should read this, sir," she said politely. Inside were the photos, the messages, the bookings, every secret Daniel thought he had hidden. Gasps filled the room. His father's face turned red with anger. Relatives looked away in shame. Daniel stood frozen, stripped of his arrogance, his pride shattered in front of the very people he wanted to impress. Maria didn't raise her voice. She didn't shed a tear. She simply turned to Daniel and whispered, "This is the price of betrayal." And with that, she walked out, her silence echoing louder than any scream could. Maria stepped out of the house, the cool night air brushing against her face. For the first time in years, she felt light, free, and strong. Behind her, the voices inside the house rose in chaos. Daniel trying to explain, his father shouting in rage, relatives whispering in disgust. But Maria didn't stop. She didn't need to. Her silence had already spoken louder than anything she could ever say. By the time Daniel stumbled out to follow her, she was gone. The woman he thought would always stay by his side, no matter how cruel he was, had disappeared like a shadow. And in her place, she had left behind a storm that tore apart his perfect image. The days that followed were brutal for Daniel. His business partners distanced themselves, deals collapsed, and his own father refused to speak to him. Friends avoided him, unwilling to be connected to the scandal. His reputation, once untouchable, was now a story of shame whispered in every corner. Maria, on the other hand, began a new life. She moved into her own apartment, far away from the toxic house that had suffocated her for years. She reconnected with her old passions, took on projects she had once abandoned, and surrounded herself with people who respected her strength. One evening, Clara visited her. "You've done what most people only dream of," she said with admiration. Maria smiled faintly. "It was never about revenge, Clara. It was about showing him and myself that silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes, silence is just power waiting for the right moment." Clara nodded. "And you chose the perfect moment." As Maria looked out the window at the setting sun, she whispered softly, almost to herself, "He broke my trust, but he gave me back my strength." And that was the truth. Daniel had tried to reduce her to nothing. But in the end, it was Maria who reduced him to rubble without shouting, without begging, without losing her dignity. The lesson was clear. Betrayal can destroy, but it can also awaken. And when it awakens the silent ones, the world better be ready.